Imagine standing in a massive Roman warehouse. You're surrounded by enough grain to feed 50,000 people for a year. But there's a problem. Thousands of rats are just waiting to destroy it all. One infestation could mean famine, riots, death. So how did the Romans, without modern pesticides or traps, keep these grain thieves out? The answer is way more clever than you think.
Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of ancient Rome's most underrated survival challenges, protecting their massive grain stores from rats and pests. This wasn't just about saving food, it was about preventing chaos. Rome's entire empire depended on stable grain supplies, and the methods they used, some are still influencing how we store food today. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand the ingenious engineering, surprising animals, and brutal practicality the Romans used to win this battle. And trust me, there's a twist you won't see coming. Let's go.
First, you need to understand why this mattered so much. Rome wasn't just a city, it was the beating heart of an empire. At its peak in the 2nd century AD, over 1 million people lived in Rome itself. That's more than any other city in the ancient world. And here's the thing, Rome couldn't feed itself. The city was built on conquest, not farmland. Most grain came from faraway provinces, Egypt, North Africa, Sicily. Ships carried hundreds of thousands of tons of wheat every year across the Mediterranean. This grain was stored in massive warehouses called Horrea. Some could hold over 100,000 tons. The emperor himself controlled the grain supply through a system called the annona, free or subsidized grain distributed to Roman citizens. But if rats got into those stores, disaster. A single rat colony could devour or contaminate tons of grain in weeks. Spoiled grain meant hungry citizens. Hungry citizens meant riots, and riots could topple emperors. This actually happened. Several emperors faced uprisings when grain shipments failed. So the Romans had to get creative, because in their world, keeping rats out wasn't just pest control, it was survival.
Let's talk about the enemy for a second. Rats and mice weren't just annoying, they were relentless. The black rat, Rattus rattus, was the primary pest in Roman grain stores. These rodents could squeeze through gaps the size of a coin, chew through wood, and reproduce at terrifying speed. A female rat can have up to 60 offspring per year. Do the math. Within months, a few rats become hundreds. And it wasn't just about eating the grain. Rats contaminated everything they touched with droppings, urine, and disease. Archaeologists have found rat gnaw marks on grain from ancient Roman sites, proof this was a constant battle. The Romans knew this. They observed the damage. They understood the scale of the threat. So what did they do? This is where things get fascinating, because they attacked the problem from multiple angles, combining architecture, biology, and brutal efficiency.
The Romans were master builders, and their first line of defense, the warehouses themselves. Roman Horrea weren't just big rooms with grain piles, they were fortresses designed to keep pests out. Here's how they did it. Most Horrea were built with raised floors, sometimes several feet off the ground, supported by pillars or vaults. This created an air gap underneath. Why? Because rats and mice struggle to climb smooth stone or brick pillars, especially when there's nothing to grip. Plus, the airflow reduced moisture and mold. Archaeologists have excavated Horrea, like the Horrea Galbae in Rome, massive complexes with dozens of storage rooms, all elevated.
The walls were made of brick or concrete, plastered smooth. No cracks, no footholds. Rats couldn't climb them. Every entry point was designed to be defensible. Windows were small, high up, and often covered with bronze or iron grates. Doors were thick wood,
fitted tightly. The fewer gaps, the fewer ways in. But here's where it gets even smarter. The Romans used pottery barriers. They would place large ceramic jars called dolia, sometimes embedded into the floor or used as storage containers. The smooth, glazed surface of pottery was nearly impossible for rats to climb. Some Horrea stored grain directly in these jars, sealed with lids. And if a rat did manage to get into a jar, it was trapped and dealt with.
But architecture alone wasn't enough, so the Romans brought in reinforcements. Cats. Yes, the same animal that lies on your couch all day was once Rome's elite pest control force. Cats were everywhere in Roman grain stores. Historical records and archaeological finds, like cat bones near Horrea, confirm this. The Romans didn't just tolerate cats, they relied on them. Pliny the Elder, a Roman naturalist writing in the 1st century AD, mentioned cats as natural enemies of mice. Roman art often depicted cats hunting rodents. Some mosaics show cats with grain or near storage areas. This wasn't decorative, it was documentation. But here's the thing, Roman cats weren't pets in the modern sense. They were working animals, semi-feral, allowed to roam freely through warehouses and granaries. They hunted constantly. Romans also used ferrets, Mustela putorius furo, and weasels. These small, agile predators could chase rats into tight spaces where cats couldn't reach. Ancient writers like Strabo noted the use of ferrets for hunting, not just in fields, but in storage areas. It was biological warfare, and it worked. But there was one more weapon in the Roman arsenal, and this one is dark.
When engineering and animals weren't enough, the Romans got ruthless. Archaeological evidence shows Romans used various traps. Simple snares, cages, and pitfall traps were common. Workers would check these daily, removing captured rats. The Romans knew about toxic substances. One of the most common rat poisons was hellebore, a poisonous plant. They would mix it with grains or bait and place it strategically. Pliny the Elder wrote about using hellebore to kill mice and other pests. They also used arsenicum, arsenic compounds, though this was rarer and more dangerous to handle. Sometimes it was just brute force. Workers would flood underground passages, smoke out nests, or use dogs trained to hunt rats. There are records of organized rat hunts in Roman warehouses, teams of workers and animals systematically clearing sections. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective. And here's the twist I promised earlier. The Romans learned from their enemies. They studied rat behavior. They noticed rats avoided certain smells, strong herbs like mint and rue. So they planted these around Horrea or scattered dried herbs inside. They observed that rats followed walls, so they placed traps along edges. This wasn't superstition, it was applied science. The Romans were experimenting, iterating, and adapting based on what worked.
So, did it work? Rome fed over 1 million people for centuries. The grain supply held. The Annona system functioned, imperfectly, but it functioned. That's the proof. Could they eliminate every rat? No, but they didn't need to. They needed to keep infestations manageable, losses acceptable, and grain flowing. And they succeeded by combining 3 layers of defense: engineering, making it hard for rats to get in; biology, using predators to hunt them down; and extermination, removing survivors by any means necessary. This multi-layered approach, defensive architecture, biological control, and active extermination, is still used today in modern pest management. The Romans pioneered integrated pest control 2,000 years ago. But there's a deeper lesson here. The Romans understood something fundamental. You can't just react to problems, you have to design systems that prevent them. Their Horrea weren't built after rat infestations destroyed grain. They were built anticipating the threat. That's strategic thinking. That's what built an empire. So, to recap, Romans kept rats out of grain stores through elevated architecture, smooth surfaces, biological predators like cats and ferrets, and aggressive extermination using traps and poison. It wasn't one solution, it was a comprehensive system. And honestly, it's a reminder that ancient people weren't primitive. They were observant, experimental, and incredibly resourceful. They solved massive logistical problems with the tools they had. If you found this fascinating, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into the hidden details of ancient Rome. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.